So here's the thing about humanity that nobody really wants to admit out loud, but we all know it's true deep down in our souls. We are one spectacularly dumb decision away from ruining literally everything for everyone else on the planet. And I'm not talking about big philosophical stuff like climate change or nuclear war. I'm talking about the fact that there are everyday items, normal things you used to be able to walk into a store and buy without filling out a government form, that are now completely banned or restricted because one absolute genius decided to do something so monumentally stupid that lawmakers had to step in and say, okay, that's it. Nobody gets to have nice things anymore. It's like when you were in school and that one kid ruins pizza day for the entire class because he decided to throw pepperoni at the ceiling. Except in this case, the kid is an adult who should absolutely know better. And the pizza is lawn darts or whatever dangerous nonsense used to be considered normal family entertainment back in the day. Welcome to the Hall of Fame of Human Stupidity, where we're going to explore 10 everyday items that got yeeted straight out of existence because someone somewhere had exactly 0 brain cells firing at the critical moment, and the rest of us are still paying the price for their Olympic-level incompetence. Let's kick things off with Kinder Surprise eggs, which if you're American, you've probably never experienced the joy of cracking open a chocolate egg to find a tiny toy inside. And before you blame the government for being party poopers, let me tell you that the United States banned these delightful little treats, not because of some vague what-if scenario, but because multiple adults, fully grown human beings who presumably had jobs and paid taxes and operated motor vehicles, decided that the best course of action when encountering a large plastic capsule inside their chocolate was to just swallow the whole thing without question. We're talking about people who looked at something obviously designed to be opened and thought, nah, I'm going to unhinge my jaw like a python and consume this entire situation whole, and then had the audacity to be surprised when it didn't go well. The FDA was like, you know what, we can't trust you people with anything, and banned them under a law from 1938 that prohibits embedding non-nutritive objects in food, which sounds reasonable until you realize that law exists because somebody definitely tried to eat something they absolutely should not have eaten and blamed everyone except themselves for the consequences. Moving right along to number 2, we have lawn darts, also known as jarts, which were basically weighted missiles that families in the 1980s would hurl at each other in the backyard for fun. And I need you to really sit with that concept for a second because these weren't cute little plastic darts. These were genuinely dangerous projectiles with metal tips that could absolutely ruin your entire day if one came down on your head. The game was supposed to work like horseshoes where you toss them at a target ring on the ground. But apparently nobody considered that combining sharp metal spikes with throwing them high into the air and children running around unsupervised might create a recipe for disaster. It took thousands of injuries and multiple deaths before someone finally looked at lawn darts and said, hey, maybe we shouldn't be selling military-grade weaponry disguised as backyard entertainment. And even then, it wasn't until a particularly tragic incident in 1987 that they got banned completely, which means there were decades where people were just casually playing a game that could theoretically result in someone getting impaled, and everyone thought this was totally fine and normal. Number 3 on our list of banned brilliance is Original Four Loko. And if you were in college between 2005 and 2010, you probably have either 0 memories or way too many memories of this particular beverage, which was essentially what would happen if Red Bull and malt liquor had a baby, and that baby was raised by bad decisions and terrible life choices. The drink combined alcohol with massive amounts of caffeine, which sounds fun in theory, but in practice just meant that people were wide awake and energized while making absolutely catastrophic decisions that they normally would have passed out before completing. The problem wasn't just that it was strong, it was that the caffeine masked how drunk you actually were. So you'd think you were totally fine and capable of complex tasks like walking or having conversations when in reality you were a complete disaster, navigating through life on pure chaos energy. After numerous hospitalizations, reports of people doing things so astronomically stupid that they defied the laws of physics and college campuses, basically turning into scenes from a post-apocalyptic movie every weekend, the FDA finally stepped in and was like, yeah, this needs to stop immediately. And now we have the watered-down version that's still bad for you, but at least won't make you think you can parkour off a roof. Number 4 brings us to mercury thermometers, which used to be in literally every medicine cabinet in America until someone apparently needed to be told that mercury, the thing that's literally named after the Roman god of speed because it moves so fast and is impossible to contain, maybe shouldn't be a household item that breaks easily and spills toxic heavy metal all over your bathroom floor. For decades, people would casually shake these glass tubes full of literal poison, stick them under their tongues and think nothing of it because that's just what you did when you had a fever. And nobody really considered the implications until enough thermometers broke and enough mercury got everywhere. and enough people had to deal with hazmat-level cleanup situations that regulators finally realized that maybe, just maybe, we should use digital alternatives instead. The wild part is that mercury thermometers were more accurate than digital ones, so we literally had to choose between precision temperature readings and not accidentally poisoning ourselves with neurotoxic substances, and apparently that was a difficult decision for way longer than it should have been. Let's talk about number 5, which is buckyballs. Those tiny magnetic spheres that became incredibly popular as a desk toy around 2009, because adults discovered they could make cool geometric shapes and patterns with them. And for approximately 5 minutes, everyone thought this was the greatest invention since sliced bread until parents started buying them for their kids, and those kids started swallowing them like they were competing in some kind of terrible Olympic sport. The issue with swallowing multiple small magnets, in case you need this explained to you, is that they can attract to each other through your intestinal walls and basically create a situation where your internal organs are being pinched together in ways that evolution definitely did not intend, requiring emergency surgery to fix what could have been avoided by simply not eating the obviously not food magnetic balls. The company tried to fight the ban by arguing that their product was marketed to adults and shouldn't be banned just because some people were using it incorrectly, which is technically a fair point, except that once you Google kids swallowed buckyballs and see the sheer volume of incidents, you start to understand why the Consumer Product Safety Commission was having none of it and decided that some things just can't exist in a world where human curiosity and terrible decision-making collide on a regular basis. Number 6 is going to hurt for everyone who grew up in the golden age of playground equipment. And I'm talking about those tall metal slides that would get so hot in the summer sun that they could legitimately give you third-degree burns, or the merry-go-rounds that spun so fast you'd achieve G-forces that NASA would be jealous of, or my personal favorite, the giant metal dome climbers that were basically designed to teach children about gravity and pain in equal measure. These playgrounds were absolutely brutal, and looking back, it's kind of amazing that any of us survived childhood without breaking every bone in our bodies because these weren't cushioned. Safety-tested environments with rubber padding and height restrictions, these were straight-up gladiator training grounds where you either learned to hang on tight or you learned to fall correctly, and there was no in-between. The death knell for old-school playgrounds came from a combination of increased liability lawsuits, better understanding of child safety, and probably one too many parents watching their kid fly off a spinning platform and thinking, you know what, maybe we shouldn't be centrifuging children for entertainment. And now we have these incredibly safe but kind of boring playgrounds where it's basically impossible to get hurt, but also impossible to feel that sweet, sweet adrenaline rush of cheating death at age 7. Moving on to number 7, we need to discuss ephedra, which was a dietary supplement that was sold at basically every health food store and gym in America throughout the 1990s and early 2000s as a miracle weight loss and energy supplement. And technically it did work for those purposes because it was essentially legal speed that you could buy over the counter without a prescription. The supplement came from a plant that had been used in traditional Chinese medicine for thousands of years. But the dose you'd get in a traditional tea versus the mega-concentrated pills that American supplement companies were pumping out were two completely different situations, like comparing a gentle breeze to a Category 5 hurricane. People were taking this stuff and experiencing rapid heart rates, dangerous spikes in blood pressure, and in some tragic cases, heart attacks and strokes. Because it turns out that dramatically increasing your metabolic rate and stimulating your central nervous system with plant-based amphetamines might have some unexpected side effects that aren't mentioned on the cheerful label promising a beach body in 30 days. The FDA finally banned ephedra in 2004 after a professional baseball player died, and the mounting evidence became impossible to ignore, but not before supplement companies made absolutely massive amounts of money selling what was essentially diet pills that could kill you. Which really makes you think about the whole natural supplements are safer than pharmaceuticals argument that people love to throw around on health forums. Number 8 is going to be controversial because some of you genuinely loved this product. And I'm talking about those awesome light-up shoes that every kid in the 1990s desperately wanted because they made you feel like you were starring in your own personal light show every time you took a step. Now, the shoes themselves weren't banned exactly, but certain versions with specific battery types got pulled from the market faster than you can say fire hazard. Because apparently having lithium batteries in footwear that's constantly being subjected to pressure, moisture, and the general chaos of a child's daily activities creates some interesting opportunities for spontaneous combustion. There were reports of shoes catching fire while kids were wearing them, which is obviously not ideal and definitely not the kind of lit that parents were hoping for when they dropped $60 on light-up sneakers that their kid would outgrow in 3 months anyway. The companies had to completely redesign the battery compartments and switch to different power sources. And while you can still buy light-up shoes today, they are nowhere near as cool as the original versions that were basically small fire hazards strapped to your feet. And honestly, that knowledge somehow makes them even more legendary in retrospect, because we were literally walking around with potential explosive devices and thought it was the height of fashion. Number 9 takes us into the world of cosmetics with skin lightening creams containing mercury. Which, yes, that's the same mercury we talked about earlier with the thermometers. And apparently at some point in history, multiple industries looked at this toxic heavy metal and thought, you know what would be great? Let's put this in as many consumer products as possible and see what happens. These creams were marketed primarily in communities where lighter skin was considered more desirable due to colorism and colonial beauty standards, which is already problematic enough without adding the fact that the active ingredient was literally poisoning people's skin and potentially damaging their kidneys, nervous systems, and brains over time with prolonged use. The creams would technically lighten skin by inhibiting melanin production, but they'd also cause a whole host of other issues like skin discoloration, scarring, and mercury poisoning symptoms that range from tremors to kidney damage to neurological problems. Because beauty standards apparently demanded that people risk their entire health for a few shades lighter complexion. Many countries have banned these products, but they still circulate in some markets because regulation is inconsistent and people are desperate enough for certain beauty ideals that they'll risk using products that are basically rubbing toxic waste on their faces. Which really says something depressing about societal beauty pressures and how far some companies will go to make a profit regardless of the consequences to their customers' well-being. Number 10 brings us full circle to something that seems almost innocent compared to mercury cosmetics and exploding shoes. And that's the classic Easy Bake Oven in its original design, which had a fundamental flaw that nobody noticed until multiple children ended up with serious burns and finger injuries. The problem was that the oven had a front-loading design with a pretty significant gap where the heating element was exposed, and kids being kids would naturally stick their fingers into any available opening because curiosity is stronger than common sense when you're 7 years old and excited about making tiny cakes. The injuries got serious enough that there was a massive recall and complete redesign of the product, because apparently toy oven that can actually burn children wasn't passing the safety standards that should have been considered before putting it on the market in the first place. The new versions have much better safety features and you basically can't hurt yourself anymore unless you're really determined. But the original Easy Bake Ovens were out there functioning as tiny torture devices, disguised as children's toys for years, before anyone decided that maybe we should make the light bulb heating element less accessible to small curious fingers that don't fully understand cause and effect yet. So here's what we've learned today, and it's not exactly encouraging for our species as a whole. We are absolutely terrible at predicting how products can go wrong until they actually go spectacularly wrong in ways that usually involve someone getting hurt, poisoned, or otherwise damaged by something that seemed perfectly reasonable until it wasn't. The real tragedy isn't just that these products got banned, it's that most of them existed for years or even decades before anyone in a position of authority looked at the mounting pile of evidence and said, okay, this is clearly a problem that needs addressing. And by that point, countless people had already suffered the consequences of someone else, is oversight or greed or just plain lack of imagination about how wrong things could go. We live in a world where every warning label exists because somebody definitely did that thing, where every product recall has a story behind it that would make you question humanity's survival instincts. And where the phrase use as directed implies that there are enough people using things in completely unintended ways that we need explicit instructions not to do obviously dangerous stuff. The items on this list are just the tip of the iceberg, because for every banned product we've talked about, there are probably dozens more that are currently available and will eventually be pulled from the market once enough people figure out creative ways to misuse them, or once we finally acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, some things shouldn't be sold to the general public without at least a basic competency test. If you enjoyed this journey through humanity's greatest hits of how did we ever think this was okay? Make sure you hit that like button, because apparently I need validation for spending my time researching the dumbest reasons products got banned. And subscribe if you want more content about the absurd reality we are all living in, where common sense is apparently not that common, and product safety regulations are written in blood and poor life choices. Drop a comment telling me about any dangerous or stupid products you remember from your childhood that probably shouldn't have existed, because I guarantee everyone has at least one story about a toy or device that looking back was absolutely unhinged and probably violated several safety standards that just didn't exist yet. And honestly, those stories are always the most entertaining part of these discussions because shared trauma bonds us all together in beautiful ways. Until next time, stay safe out there. Read warning labels and remember that somewhere right now someone is definitely using a product in a way that will eventually get it banned for everyone else. So enjoy your relatively dangerous consumer goods while you still can, because nothing lasts forever, especially when humans are involved in the equation.